Okay, when you hear the word Iran, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably conflict or politics, right? But to really get what's happening in the headlines today, we have to look way past the current news cycle and into thousands of years of history. So, in this first part of our explainer, we're going to dig into the ancient foundations of modern Iran.
So, where do we even start? Well, our journey is going to begin by looking beyond the headlines and into the soul of ancient Persia. Then, we'll see how the arrival of Islam completely reshaped the empire. And finally, we'll uncover the roots of a religious divide that, believe me, still echoes today.
Before we can even begin to talk about politics, we have to talk about the people and their history. Because to really, truly understand Iran, you've got to peel back the layers of today's news and discover this vast, ancient civilization that forms its very bedrock.
So let's start with the most basic question of all. Not about governments, not about policies, but about the people themselves and the land they call home.
First off, let's just get a sense of the sheer scale here. Iran is a huge country. We're talking the 19th largest in the entire world. It's a massive piece of land, way, way bigger than a lot of people might picture. And its geography? It's anything but one note. Seriously, forget the stereotype of just one big desert. Iran is a land of incredible, staggering contrasts. You've got these vast central deserts, sure, but also enormous mountain ranges where you can see snowy peaks right from the streets of Tehran, and even these lush tropical coasts. It's got everything. Okay, so now to really get to the heart of Iranian identity, we have to take a trip back in time. And I mean way back. Back to the very roots of the civilization we all know as Persia. The history here is just immense. We're talking about a civilization taking shape thousands of years ago, right alongside the other great ancient empires. It's a timeline that stretches from the very first city-states to the rise of one of the first great religions to the epic empire of Cyrus the Great and, yeah, eventually its conquest by Alexander. And the spiritual heart of ancient Persia was this faith, Zoroastrianism. It was one of the world's very first monotheistic religions, and its central idea, this cosmic battle between a good god and an evil spirit, well, that idea would go on to have a profound influence on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. You can see this unique worldview in some of their practices, like the famous Towers of Silence. Now, the dead were left out to be consumed by vultures. This wasn't some morbid ritual. It actually came from a deep reverence for nature. They believed that pure elements like earth and fire shouldn't be contaminated by a dead body. It's also really important to get that Persian isn't just one single group of people. Over thousands of years, they've been known by many names: the Achaemenids, the Medes, the Sassanids. They're all part of the same continuous, evolving civilization that today we call Iranian. And at their absolute peak, under legendary leaders like Cyrus and Darius, they forged one of the greatest empires in all of history. They built these monumental cities like Persepolis, which was a global center for art and science and government. And its magnificent ruins, they still inspire awe today. All right, the next pivotal moment, the next huge shift in this long, long story, comes in the 7th century. And it comes with the arrival of a new faith that would change Persia forever. But this was not some simple conquest of a weak or dying people. No way. When the armies of Islam arrived, they came face to face with the mighty Sassanid Empire, a civilization that was at the absolute height of its power and sophistication, a civilization that saw itself as far, far more advanced. And this quote right here is absolutely key to understanding the Persian point of view. They didn't just see it as a simple conversion. Instead, they believed that Islam itself was profoundly shaped and enriched by their ancient culture. The idea is that the new faith drank from the fountains of their civilization. So, this deep sense of their own cultural superiority and identity, it led the Persians to embrace a different branch of Islam. And that choice created a fundamental division that continues to shape the Middle East to this very day. Okay, so here's the crucial point. After the Prophet Muhammad's death, there was a split. The Sunni majority believed the next leader should just be an elected administrator, a caliph. But the Persians, they were drawn to the Shia belief that leadership had to pass through the Prophet's bloodline to a spiritual leader called an imam. For them, it was a way of holding on to their distinct identity, even within Islam. And this sense of being different, it runs right down to the language they speak. Farsi, which is modern Persian, is an Indo-European language.
It's completely unrelated to Arabic, which is a Semitic language. They don't just sound different, they literally come from different language families.
And look, if you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. It's a point of immense pride and historical fact. Persians are not Arabs. They have their own unique ethnic identity and their own ancient language, Farsi. This distinction is absolutely central to their national identity, and it's a key factor in the cultural and political dynamics of the entire region. So to recap the foundation we've built here, Iran is the modern continuation of ancient Persia, one of the cradles of world civilization. Its identity is profoundly shaped by its history before Islam. Its people are Persian, not Arab, and they have their own language, and their choice of Shia Islam sets them apart from the Sunni majority in the Arab world all around them. With this ancient foundation now firmly in place, we've really set the stage. So, the next big question is, how does this deep history of empire, faith, and fierce independence collide with the forces of the 20th century? With oil, with revolution, with geopolitics? Well, that is exactly what we are going to explore in part 2.
All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unravel the complex story of modern Iran by looking at the key moments in the 20th century that shaped it. We're talking oil, power plays, revolution, and war, a whole century of conflict that really explains so much about where the country is today. So, let's get into it.
You know, if you really want to get a feel for Iran, a fascinating place to look is its films. It's like a window into the nation's soul, and what you see reflects this deep collective trauma. This quote just nails it. It talks about a society dealing with wounds so deep that the lines between who's a victim and who's a perpetrator just get completely blurred.
So how does a country get to this point? I mean, this kind of pain doesn't just appear out of thin air, right? It's the result of 100 years of massive, earth-shaking events. To really get what's happening now, we've got to rewind the clock to the early 20th century, to the moment Iran's destiny was changed forever by the world's hunger for one thing.
And that one thing was oil. Our story really kicks off with foreign intervention, and it's all driven by the discovery of oil. You got to understand, this wasn't just some commodity. It was the fuel for empires, and it put Iran, or Persia as it was called back then, squarely in the sights of the world's biggest powers.
Think about this for a second. The British Empire, with the most powerful navy in the world, decides to switch its entire fleet from coal to oil. It's a massive decision. And suddenly, because of that one choice, Iran's oil fields become maybe the most strategic piece of real estate on the planet. This ancient land was now the key to global military power.
And this right here is where so much of the trouble begins. Look at this deal. The British got everything. Total control over finding the oil, drilling for it, selling it for 60 years. And what did Iran get in return for its own natural resource? Basically, nothing. No say, no royalties on the profits. It was a completely one-sided deal that siphoned unbelievable wealth out of the country. And you can bet it planted a deep seed of resentment.
That resentment just simmered for decades, and it brings us to a huge turning point, 1953. This is the moment Iran's short-lived dream of democracy was crushed, all thanks to the same foreign powers who were controlling its oil.
So along comes this guy, Mohammad Mossadegh. He's hugely popular, he's democratically elected, and he does something that was just unthinkable at the time. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. He said, hey, this is our most valuable resource. It should be for the benefit of our people, not some foreign company. He wanted Iran to finally, as the saying goes, take the handle of the frying pan.
Well, you can probably guess how the West reacted. It was fast, it was decisive. Britain's MI6 and America's CIA teamed up and basically said, nope, not on our watch. They engineered a coup. Let that sink in. They literally overthrew a democratically elected government just to get the oil back. And in Mossadegh's place, they put the Shah back on the throne, a monarch who they knew would play ball.
The Shah's rule was this really strange, brutal mix. On one hand, he was pushing this super fast, aggressive westernization, sometimes by force, but at the same time, he was crushing any kind of dissent with his secret police, the Savak, and they were absolutely feared. So you have this combination of people feeling like their culture is under attack while also being terrified to speak out. It was a recipe for disaster.
And that recipe for disaster, that powder keg, it finally exploded in 1979. The Islamic Revolution wasn't just a religious thing. It was the boiling over of all that anger against foreign meddling and the Shah's brutal regime. But as we'll see, the dream of this revolution, well, it turned into something else entirely.
You have to understand, the guy leading this whole thing, Ayatollah Khomeini, was incredibly strategic. He didn't just appeal to religious conservatives. No, he built this huge coalition of everyone who hated the Shah. He promised autonomy for ethnic groups like the Kurds. He promised more rights for women. He promised a voice for leftists and socialists. He basically promised something for everybody.
But then, the Shah is gone. And what happens to all those promises? Poof. They vanish. Once Khomeini and his allies were in power, they systematically turned on every single group that helped them get there. The Kurdish movements were crushed, women's rights were rolled back drastically, and the leftists were purged from public life. The revolution's big tent became a very small, very authoritarian room.
You know, as one Iranian described it, under the Shah, there was political repression, but you had social freedom. After the revolution, you got both, political repression and social repression. This new moral police force was created, and they started controlling the most personal parts of people's lives.
Okay, so you've got this new, shaky, revolutionary government, and just when you think things couldn't get more intense, they get hit with this massive threat from the outside. But here's the crazy part. This threat is what ends up cementing their power for decades.
8 years. Just let that sink in for a moment. What followed was a brutal, bloody, devastating war that lasted for 8 long years.
Right after the revolution, neighboring Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invades. And this wasn't just Iraq's idea. Saddam was being armed and funded by many of the same Western and regional powers who were terrified of this new Iranian government and wanted to wipe it off the map before its revolutionary ideas could spread.
But it completely backfired. And this quote explains exactly why. You cannot invade a country in revolution. It's so true. The Iranian people were still fired up with that revolutionary energy. So instead of collapsing, they rallied together against this foreign invader. The war didn't destroy the regime, it actually solidified it. It gave them a cause to unite the country around.
And that brings us right back to the beginning. When you look back at the last 100 years, from that first lopsided oil deal to the coup, the revolution, and that devastating war, you see this pattern, this cycle. Foreign intervention fuels internal repression, which fuels more conflict. It's a pattern that's been forged in fire over a century. And it leaves us with a really tough question, right? What on earth would it take to finally break that cycle?